And now, let's join Maggie Linton on Sirius XM Urban View, Channel 110.
Well, welcome back. Tomorrow, information on traveling to Kenya and Tanzania, and we'll learn more about Afghanistan from author Nadia Hashemi and her debut novel, The Pearl That Broke Its Shell. But we continue the show with a more in-depth look at the new NBA Commissioner, Adam Silver. Here to enlighten and inform is Jinnie Cristerna. She is Jet Magazine contributed licensed clinical social worker and AKA the High Achiever Therapist. Welcome, Jinnie.
Hi, good morning, Maggie. Well, thank you for having me. I was in the middle of sipping a cup of caffeine here. How are you?
I'm doing good. Got you up a little early this morning, didn't I?
Well, you know what? It's always great to hear your voice. So that was a nice way to wake up.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about, you wrote a nice little piece on on Adam Silver and him dealing with Donald Sterling, but you titled it How Adam Silver's Response Helped Women and People of Color.
Absolutely. And, you know, one of the things that a lot of people know about me, but I'm starting to realize as I'm becoming a little more popular, which is interesting because I've never been popular at all. Mm-hmm. Most people don't know that I'm Korean, Black, and Jewish, and my husband's Mexican and Catholic. So
well, there you go. You got everybody covered, don't you?
Right. The UN meeting is held at my house from time to time. And, you know, so my network and my friends are very diverse. And, you know, I tend to have a very different eye when I look at things. Mm-hmm. And so when I talk about privilege, I talk about it from various standpoints. And, you know, African Americans have privileges, Asian Americans have privilege, my Caucasian American, you know, colleagues and friends have privileges. So everyone has a set of privileges. And I think what Adam Silver did in a very, you know, bold way, but, you know, people kind of knew he would be pretty bold because of Stern. So they worked together for so long. You knew some of that would kind of be there with Silver, is that he took his privilege and he demonstrated what that looked and felt like when you are in power. Mm-hmm. Because one of the things that people really struggle with is how to use power. People understand power as being either positive or negative, just like they understand money as being good or bad. And the truth is, power doesn't have any particular charge. It's neutral. It's the intent behind it that gives it, you know, either a positive or negative feel. And I think Adam Silver used it in such a profound way that he demonstrated what power, when used well, can actually do to not so much take away what has been done, but to start to undo some of the damage and right some of the wrongs that has unfortunately occurred, especially here in America, around race.
And the race card always comes up. And,
absolutely.
You know, it is not something that I don't think will ever go. I just had a guy on last week and we were talking about the Civil Rights Bill and that legislation. It's 50 years. It'll be 50 years old on July 2nd. And it's still a question of what's fair, what's not fair. And minorities seem to be sliding backwards. But in the realm of pro sports, they are exceeding, but not all of them are using their money in the right way. Right.
What you're bringing up, Maggie, is so interesting. So when I work with athletes, and
you work with a lot of them. Yeah.
My specialty is working with individuals who were raised in poverty or the middle class, and all of a sudden they have this wealth. That's my playground niche, if you will, because there's a transition space that is very, very small, if any, that they have to work with. And so a lot of times we will see them use their money and their power and their privilege in ways that actually work against them, which is often why they end up losing all of that money so quickly, right? And then, you know, they're struggling to figure out where they fit and make a living. So when we talk about money and power, what we're really talking about is trying to understand for that individual, because it's different for each person, it just looks the same when they're behaving in a certain way. We're looking to see what they're either running from, what they're trying to fill in terms of the void that they have in their life, or what they're trying to validate to themselves. So money and power, if the intent is off, if the intent is negative, or if the intent is very just kind of focused on making yourself feel better about who you are because you don't already, then that's when we tend to see the problems come up, especially with athletes when they start to get all this money. And that's the unfortunate part because they probably won't get another chance to make that kind of money again.
And so often they have a thought process, and I think this happens to people, say, who sometimes win the lottery and things like that, that they never expected to have that money, so they have to go out and spend it all.
Right. It becomes the instant gratification, delayed gratification. I use the example, Maggie. If you took, let's take the most poised guy in the world. Let's take the Pope, right? And he's dressed in white, wonderful pointy hat at the top of his head, very calm and collected. This Pope is a little more jazzy, but generally speaking, you take him, you put him in the desert, 40, 50 days, no water, no food, and you bring him back and you open the doors to a room filled with his favorite food, all the water he could drink. What do you think he's going to do?
He's going to go for it.
There you go. He's not going to be this poised man of dignity. He is going to drink the water as quickly as he can. He's going to try to satisfy himself as quickly as he can. When we talk about people who come into money, they have been starved for so long that when they get it, they kind of gorge on it. And unfortunately, the money doesn't last a very long time because they're gorging, and it's not so much there's a limit like our stomachs have a limit. So they go and do all these things because they really do believe at some level they're not worthy of it, or, it's not going to stay anyway, so let me do everything I can possibly do right now so I can say that I've done it.
Right. And instead of putting stuff away, thinking about the rainy days
exactly,
that come, because the rainy days always come. That's
the
cycle of life.
They're used to the rainy day.
Yeah.
So they're used to the rainy day, right? That's something that they know. And this is what's really hard for people to hear, which is, you may want success, but the truth is subconsciously you may not actually feel you deserve it, or you may feel that it doesn't last long. So that's how people start to sabotage themselves and undo any of the positive things that they've been working so hard to do, because they really don't feel like they deserve it, because at the end of the day they feel the other shoe is going to fall, so it doesn't really matter. So the mindset is so important.
Getting that way of thinking to the right process is sometimes the hardest thing, not even more so than just earning the money.
Absolutely. The money means absolutely nothing. And this is what people struggle with. Money, it's cornflakes. You have access to money whenever you want, believe it or not. It's the mindset, the way that you think about money. People have this love-hate relationship with money, and when it's all said and done, they love it when they have it, and they hate it when they don't.
Mm-hmm. Very true. Folks, if you want to jump in on the conversation, you're certainly welcome to. It is 866-801-8255. Once again, it's 866-801-8255. I think we're going to take a break now, and then when we come back, we'll take your questions, and we'll continue talking about a number of different things. In fact, going back to Adam Silver in just a moment. So stay tuned.
We'll be right back with more conversation about today's hottest topics right after this short break. This is the Maggie Linton Show on Sirius XM Urban View. And now let's join Maggie Linton on Sirius XM Urban View, Channel 110.
Well, welcome back. We continue with licensed clinical social worker and high achiever therapist Jinnie Cristerna. We talk about NBA Commissioner Adam Silver and others. I want to go back a little more to Adam Silver, because in your article you said that Silver, in a sense, set the bar very high for others in that similar position, and also for perhaps owners to look at themselves and check themselves just a little bit more.
Absolutely. And that's what I really like about Adam Silver. being the first person to do something is always hard because you really don't know how it's going to turn out. And oftentimes people are afraid of it backfiring. So when he gave something that was out of the blue, like people expected a fine. How much of a fine, was up in the air, but people expected a fine. Most people did not expect a ban for life. That in and of itself, when you're talking about a particular culture in which Sterling was referring to consistently throughout the audio, he kept saying, the culture that I have to live in, the culture that the world is, kind of seen through. This culture, no, I'm not sure who this culture is. I have my own opinion about that. But whatever culture this is that he's referring to, I'm very much of the belief that Adam Silver wasn't necessarily banning Sterling for life because he's punishing Sterling. I really believe that he did the ban for life and used that as a message to other owners to say, we're not going to deal with this, because Sterling is clearly one of the older owners of an NBA franchise. Mm-hmm. And so some people thought, well, he's pretty old. We're not sure how much time God has for him on this planet. And, my thing is I don't get in the middle of that. That's between him and his God. But when it's all said and done, for people who have like minds like Sterling and who have a sense of privilege and entitlement more so, money doesn't necessarily get them upset. I mean, it pulls their goat. They don't like to have to pay a fine. They prefer to spend their money on things that they want. So they don't necessarily like it. But what really gets under their skin is when they're excluded from something. And that's why I thought what he did was very bold. And if you look at how Sterling has responded, he is fiercely opposed to what Silver has done. So Silver knew exactly what to do to get the attention of people in that particular quote-unquote culture. Mm-hmm. So I think in that way, he set the bar really high. And, other people who are in similar positions, who are leading, who are making decisions for an entire group and who set the standard, now have precedent. Now they can look and say, you know what? This has been done in the NBA. I can now do it. It's something that, won't cause a huge uproar. You've had a majority of the franchise owner agree with it. So, hey, the tide has shifted. It's okay for me to do the same thing. Maybe not a ban for life, because that might not be available, but something very, very harsh to send the message that we won't tolerate racism and prejudice in this organization.
Yeah. You mentioned that, but, as long as white owners continue to run teams that are predominantly in black, when you look at the pro sport roster, the NBA and NFL are definitely dominated by black men. There's no
Absolutely.
ifs, ands, and buts about that. The ownership continues to be basically lily white. There are some people within the management realm, but the actual ownership is still pretty much lily white.
Mm-hmm.
And there are some minority owners within a few organizations, but not much. And until some of that culture also begins to change and enlightening them, there have always been a few owners that were what I call a little bit more enlightened than others, or else
Right.
the league would have probably never have become integrated in the first place. But, when I think of the NFL, now them trying to regulate what's being said on the field, you can't say the N-word to each other. It's like, get out of the way. This is on the field. What, are you going to mic every player to find out if they did or didn't say the N-word to each other?
Right.
That within itself is stupid to me.
Right. Well, here's the thing. Every organization, the NFL, the NBA, you're going to have the application look very different. So, of course, it's not going to be executed the same way that Silver has done it. And one of the things I like about Silver was that he worked within the parameters of which he was given, and he used it to leverage his privilege quite well. It's going to look different in the NFL. I'm on the alumni board of governors at the University of Chicago, which is a fantastic university. It's my alma mater. I'm a little biased. But what I will say is one of the things that I do like is that, Silver and I'm hoping other people in his position as well do this too, is we're taught to think about situations as they arise and not use cookie-cutter solutions to similar situations. Having an understanding and an appreciation of, the dynamics that are different in any situation or culture that we go into, whether it be an ethnic culture or whether it be an organizational culture. Being mindful of those and being creative and working within those parameters, I think, is really what makes for a successful outcome. In the NFL, you're absolutely right. It's going to look so different, Maggie. And if they try to do something as silly as miking everyone, that would just be silly.
Yeah.
So it would be one of those things I would hope that whoever, is in a position to make a change really is thoughtful about how that change would look in the most effective way for them to do so.
Right. We've got a call from Lisa in Wisconsin. Go ahead, Lisa. Good morning.
Oh, yes. Good morning, Maggie. Thanks very much for taking my call. And
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to thank you for, again, having a really excellent show. And your guest, I've just become a regular of your show now.
Thank you.
I really like it a whole lot. And I wanted to also just thank your guest for the work that she's doing and the insight. I'm really glad to know that somebody's focused on helping these players, because that is something that a lot of people don't recognize. People will judge them as being, dumb and ignorant for their decisions. And I'm not saying their decisions aren't necessarily enlightened, but there's a reason for it. When people come from such drastic backgrounds and they find themselves in a different setting, it must be very difficult.
Jenny?
It is, and it's called culture shock. It happens, when African Americans who are raised in certain environments go off to colleges that are, in the middle of nowhere. I mean, I grew up in Inglewood on the south side of Chicago, and Maggie, as you know, that was lots of fun.
Yeah.
And went to my wonderful alma mater, Franklin and Marshall College in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. Culture shock set in like the first 2 weeks, and I cried and wanted to come home so badly. But, wherever you go, when the culture is so different than where you came from, no amount of preparation can really absolve and take away the shock and the transition that you're going to have when you move to a new environment. So a lot of it has to do with helping athletes become a lot more aware and be better prepared for what they're going up against. I do the sports psychology for USA Taekwondo, the governing body for the Olympic sport of Taekwondo. And, when we start those athletes young, understanding who they are, being comfortable in their own skin, exposing them to different environments, having them travel all over the world so they can see and experience different lifestyles, different cultures, they're better prepared for life, not just for a sport, but for life. And the same thing goes with these professional athletes. Sometimes they don't have that kind of exposure. That's why sport at a young age is so important. But Maggie, when we kind of take them from the neighborhood to a college and then plop them right into the NBA, especially when they haven't graduated from college, we do them such a huge disservice. But when they do go into the professional field, they really do need to have or be assigned or get to select by either choice or kind of a non-choice, a therapist. I really do believe that, because I think they make better decisions when they have a clearer head and when they dealt with some of those personal stigmas, and they like themselves a lot better, and they realize their future is as big and broad as they could ever imagine, and they don't have to gorge themselves on what they have right now. They can keep it for the rest of their life.
And Jenny, if I could just add to that, I also think that with them being in the public spotlight, they represent us so much better too, because it really does seem like a horrible misrepresentation of people of color to have these people on this tremendous platform kind of just falling on their face. And it's because of them not having the help and the support and the resources and kind of being thrown into the setting unprepared. So I think that, again, the work that you're doing is so valuable because it helps this person to make the best possible representation of themselves in this public spotlight that they're in.
Absolutely. And I'm so glad you raised that point, because the pressure from being a role model is nothing like they ever expected, Maggie.
Mm-hmm.
And to your caller, I'm so sorry I didn't get your name.
Lisa.
But Lisa, Maggie and Lisa,
Yeah.
The pressure is real. Everyone says, oh, I want to be in the spotlight, I want to be a superstar, but when you get there, the pressure is something that you cannot even imagine. It's beyond your wildest imagination, and it either takes you on this narcissistic high that you cannot come down from unless you're knocked down. And I promise you, very, very rarely do people get back up. Or you break under the pressure and do, things that are detrimental not only to yourself but to others. So the pressure is real. Most athletes, whether they're ready for the NBA, the NFL, or any pro sport or not, they struggle with that. And that's something that I've always advocated, especially with men of color, women of color, and professional sports coming in. The first few years, they really should have a therapist, not a sports psychologist to help them with their game, but a therapist. They don't have to see me. I don't care who they see. As long as they see somebody and have an outlet to talk about what's going on in their head, that's what they need. That's what we all need. A therapist should be like your family practitioner.
And we don't talk enough about getting the mental health care that we need in order to be more positive. And to move in the right direction.
And that's so true, if I could just add, because a lot of times these individuals are totally isolated. Their families are kind of like depending upon them. And, they kind of become somewhat of a meal ticket, not necessarily even in a bad way, but just that they're able to offer that and their families need it so much, so that most of the people then outside of their families that are coming in contact with them perhaps never would have had anything to do with them if it wasn't for this windfall. So they're surrounded by people who none of can really understand them and where they are. So having that therapist, having someone that is kind of like, on their team, they're not looking at them as a meal ticket. They're not looking at them to produce. They're just going, what are your needs, and focusing on that. I think that is like, I'm just thrilled to know that you're doing that. I really am, and I hope that people will reach out to you for those services instead of just kind of finding themselves in the path that so many other people who've gone before them, where it doesn't have to turn out that way. You see so many outcomes like that I think some of the people think that this is almost like some type of Shakespearean tragedy that must occur, and it really isn't.
All right. I'm going to have to cut you off there. Listen, thank you so much, Lisa. Wonderful call. And thank you for adding to the show today. And Jinnie Cristerna, thank you very much again, too. Always wonderful.
I love being on your show.
Yeah, again, it will be. Jet Magazine contributing licensed clinical social worker and also high achiever therapist. It is Jinnie Cristerna. You can find out more at her website, highachiever.net. Tomorrow, information on traveling to Kenya and Tanzania, and we'll learn more about Afghanistan with Nadia Hashimi. You've been listening to The Maggie Linton Show.